Hey everybody, this is Perch. On this channel, I've talked about the X-Men quite a lot. It's a series that's near and dear to my heart. And I was talking to kind of an older friend, not old age old, but just somebody who's been friends for a while. And they're talking about how X-Men fandom. There's really kind of two of them now. There's two very distinct groups, and that's perhaps a major problem for Marvel because it's almost impossible to satisfy those two groups. You have group number one who, pretty much thinks the one of the kind of zenith of storytelling within comics and the X-Men was the Dark Phoenix saga. And remember very fondly the John Byrne era, the Mark Silvestri era, the Jim Lee era, kind of these kind of bigger things. The 12, the whole Apocalypse legacy, Louise Simonson on X Factor and all the things that came with it, the X-Men in Australia, introduction of Marauders, kind of all, Maddie Pryor, all of this stuff that makes up kind of, X-Men lore. If you came into X-Men, either from the very, very beginning when Stan Lee was doing it, or, with the Chris Claremont, all new, all different era, that's that group. But Wolverine and a lot of these characters were introduced 50 years ago. That's the crazy part about things like, the Days of Future Past. I mean, we're heading, I think, yeah, I should know the dates off the top of my head, but if we're not there, we're really close to there for that being half a century old. And anyway, so which nobody likes. I don't like that fact. That fact sucks. Anyway, that is, one kind of branch of X-Men fandom. The second branch kind of came into existence with the Grant Morrison all new X-Men. And for whatever reason, I mean, Marvel pushed hard. That's a jumping on point for new readers, and several new readers did. It was that was really the X-Men. And for people who liked, his theory was you liked the X-Men cartoon, but then you grew up and you wanted something a little bit more adult, a little bit more edgy. And that's where you came into the Grant Morrison run, and and that became your series. And then you had the Joss Whedon run, although people don't talk about that because Joss Whedon bad. Um, and that's the second group. So that second group finds things like the Krakoa era to be the pinnacle of storytelling, and that is as good as it gets for comics. The Krakoa era, because that's where they took a lot of things that Grant Morrison kind of teed up and some stuff that Joss Whedon teed up. And then, there was a whole, the dark time, with them on an island in San Francisco and, not really, but the X-Men at that point were more of a separatist group. They were a little bit more militant. It was a little bit less saving the hero, a little bit more quips and swagger. And so you have the Kieran Gillen era, you have the Matt Fraction era, you have a little bit the Brubaker, but very little there. And I had Jason Aaron doing his run. Bendis, of course. But to them, Krakoa equals Dark Phoenix Saga. That's where a lot of storylines came together. That's where, they really did big, massive things. You felt like you're part of something huge. And so you have these two fandoms that, in order to satisfy one, you can't satisfy the other. I think the first group is like, hey, Colossus is a really cool character, and there's a lot you could do with him, and he's got the lore of his little sister, and the entanglement with Kitty Pryde and all that. And the second group's like, yeah, metal guys are kind of lame, and Kitty should be gay, and I like mutants who poop ice cream. That there is a pooping ice cream mutant. Anyway, that's not a joke. Anyway, if you like the second one, that first one is never going to work for you. If you like the first one, that second one is never going to work for you. It's too silly and stupid. And the other one's too old fashioned. It's a little bit like how some people look at kind of Jack Kirby work on the early Fantastic Four and are like, I mean, that looks like ancient, well, in some cases it is. But those two groups, and I on this channel, I regularly piss off that second group because I am definitely the first group. I like those storylines. I love those eras of the X-Men. And the second one is just a little bit to, throw everything away and just go for goofy jokes. That's how it feels like to me anyway. Anyway, But that second group hates the shit out of me. Like, you can go to message boards, and I am enemy number one. You don't think about me as the big, the big adversary for comic fans. But if you go to X-Men fandom, Perch is absolutely hated. Anyway, that's a long lead up, but just I'm curious what you think of that two, those two designations. I think that nails it, quite frankly, and I think it nails the problem because Marvel can satisfy one unless they thoroughly kind of divide the books, don't cross over. Just here's but the problem is their staff, their editorial, the people they employ are very much in the camp of Group 2. They don't know what to do with Group 1, even though Group 1 would be more commercially successful, do better. I think the current From the Ashes, I think X-Force and Weapon X-Men are very much in the first group. They will get sales, but the company doesn't know what to do with it because they're more interested in Group 2, which is can we reignite the Krakoa era of kind of silliness. Anyway. That's where we got. Yes, I'm aware that Brevoort apparently doesn't like the Krakoa era, has gone against it as much as humanly possible, but all the same, we're stuck in it. So here's a mail, kind of the further point. It says, are the X-Men back from the ashes yet? It says, Dear Perch, it's been about 8 to 9 months since the From the Ashes relaunch has started, and it really doesn't feel like the X-Men are really back in the comics. Sure, it may just be me, being somebody who really hasn't followed the X-books too closely, but I don't feel like anybody really cares about the line behind, besides Gail Simone's bizarre fan following. None of the solo books have really landed, other than maybe Magic, but that seems to be more of a people horny for her on the covers than a story thing. Yeah, true. Man, you and me keep saying that Marvel was really out of it right now. Like the X-Men should be a marquee title, but there is no energy around it. It is almost as if Krakoa and putting Tom Brevoort on as editor wasn't a good idea. In other news, I just watched the 10th episode of the original Lum anime. Okay. I know who. I didn't always look at who wrote the mail-in, but I know from these comments. It was nice seeing Taro developing feelings for Lum. It was an interesting adaptation of the manga story. I'm also debating whether or not to pull the trigger and buy that Ranma reprint box of the original 38 tankobons. Yes, it's expensive, but it's a great deal, and you absolutely need that. It's your collection for sure. Look, I mean, to the point, I think that, the X-Men are stuck. I think you have to abandon one of those two groups. The challenge is, I think group number 2 doesn't actually buy the comics, meaning I think that your sales with group 2 are going to top out around 40,000. And I think it'll be really hard and the longer you go, by the way, down that path, the more you're going to sit at that line, and it's going to be harder to, even if you do decide to change course, a lot of damage has been done. I don't know that you ever get back there. And so I think you need to pull the trigger soon, because I think group 1 can't, and if you put good talent on it, I think group 1 can get you into the, 100,000 reliably selling. You can get at least into that Batman, Spider-Man era of sales, but you're going to have to really go all in on some of these books. I liked what Joe Casey is doing with Weapon X-Men. So not just because we've had him on the show. I think it's a good title. I think it hits the right notes for a commercially successful X book. The characters are acting more or less like you'd expect. There's some mystery, there's some intrigue, there's some action. It's a good book. Jeff Thorne's X-Force is a good book. I think he's juggling quite a lot right now. He needs to start paying some of it off, but it's a good book. The challenge is those two books have a fairly focused mission, and I think the others, are busy either creating new characters so the authors can get some royalties someday. I'm saying that too tongue in cheek. Marvel will find a way to screw them. Don't you worry. Don't you really worry, Miss Simone. But it's still like the tone of the book and X-Men in general. I mean, is funny when they announce that they're, the fall of the Krakoa era and we're moving on, we're turning a new page to it. There are a bunch of people on Twitter, fans of group number 2, who are like, if they go back to the X-Mansion, I will never buy that comic again. And the answer is they should have been like, well, you weren't buying it, you were pirating it anyway, so see ya. I think you've got to get the X-Men back to some level of tether. And I'm not the biggest fan of the Mansion, but keep in mind, the X-Men hadn't been in the Mansion for a long ass time. I mean, you're really for any kind of consistent time in the Mansion, you're back to the Joss Whedon run. You're like 20 years at least back to get to when they were actually hanging out in the Mansion. They've been everywhere. I mean, they would stop in for brief periods of time, like when they were the decimation happened after House of M, stuff like that. There's times when they were there, but that's been a long time. The Mansion hasn't played anything, and the fact that that is a striking point for people, I think, is telling. Where do you want them then? Well, right now we've got them scattered all over everywhere, and it doesn't feel like there's any kind of consistent mission or throughput. They're doing a story of the hunt for Xavier, where Xavier goes on the run, and the X-Men have mixed feelings about him. Well, we've done that storyline. They literally have done that storyline 30 years ago. It doesn't mean you can't go back and do it again. It's just it's not natural or healthy for the title to be stuck like this, and I don't think it can move forward or evolve or get sales if it's just in this limbo state. And that's really where it feels like it's at. Anyway, I think, look, for the X-Men, they got to make a call. If they go with a second group, that's the group they want to entertain, you could do that. But I'll tell you, it cannot support, 8 titles a month like that. And, characters like Wolverine and Storm, and characters that I think the company would really like to push, especially if we're heading into an era where we're going to get a lot of them in the MCU and we're going to go with the X-Men for a decade or more as big box office hits. You have to think commercially. Not to beat the point again. If you read Weapon X-Men, you get a title that feels like something that will fit the movies, that will be commercially successful, that will generate activity, that will tie well, that fits. That's what the movies will want to be. That's what they'll need to be. If you go down this other path of like, let's do a series of Dazzler doing a concert with silly jokes, that entertains a very small group of people. And I it is a cliche, and I hate to say it, but those people generally aren't buying the comics. The proof is in the numbers. The numbers for the X lineup right now are incredibly soft. And why? Of course they are. I mean, look at what we've got. Anyway, are you buying these series? Are you group 1, group 2? Is there a group 3 that I'm forgetting about? There might be. Somebody will be in here and be like, I'm group 3, the group that liked the original Stan Lee and Kirby, and I everything from the introduction of Wolverine on, I've hated. Okay. I don't meet many of those people, but I'm sure they exist somewhere. Anyway, thanks for listening.